All righty. There's one person who's standing between you and the life that God has planned for you. This person gets in your way at almost every turn. They trip you up at virtually every opportunity. When you're right, this person often tells you that you're wrong. And when you're wrong, this person is most likely to say, it's not your fault, you're the victim. This person pretends to be your best friend, but often behaves more like your worst enemy. Who is this person? I imagine most of you may have already guessed. It's the one who shows up in your selfies. It's you. More than anyone else or anything else, the one standing in the way of the life that God has for you, and no doubt the life that you really want in the deepest part of you, the one standing in the way is you. This is exactly what Watchman Nee talked about in his book, The Normal Christian Life. In it, he said, anyone who serves God will discover sooner or later that the greatest hindrance to his work is not others, but himself. And it's not just your weaknesses that stand in your way. It's also your strengths. And it's not just your desire to sin that stands in your way. It's also your desire to do well, if you could actually believe that. In order to live a productive, effective, abundant Christian life, you're going to have to deal with and conquer that person who's looking back at you in the mirror. And not just once, but day after day after day, every day of your life. Over the past several weeks, we've been looking at how to navigate life's defining moments, those choices that we make to determine the direction and the quality of our lives. Tonight, we're going to look at confronting the biggest challenge of all, the biggest choice you'll have to make on a day-to-day, consistent basis if you want your life to be what it can truly be. Our text tonight is in John chapter 12. Jesus is speaking some words to his followers that sound similar to statements that he made at other times in some of the other Gospels. So this principle is something that he takes very seriously. This story begins when a couple of Greeks who may have heard about Jesus from the cleansing of the temple came to Philip and said, "We would like to see Jesus." Philip told Andrew, and Andrew told Jesus. And then Jesus said this to his followers. Look in John chapter 12, verses 23 through 28. John 12, 23 through 28. Says, Jesus replied to them, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. I assure you, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains by itself. But if it dies, it produces a large crop. The one who loves his life will lose it, and the one who hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. If anyone serves me, he must follow me. Where I am, there my servant will also be. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. Now my soul is troubled. What should I say? Father, save me from this hour? But that is why I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name." Then a voice came from heaven. "I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again." Now, some of Jesus' words here echo what was recorded that he said in other gospels. I mentioned that earlier. For example, in Luke's gospel, in Luke 9:23, Jesus said, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me." Now, for me, the key word in that passage is daily. Because denying yourself or dying to self is a daily process. In the book Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis wrote this: "The real problem of the Christian life comes where people do not usually look for it. It comes the very moment you wake up each morning. All your wishes and hopes for the day rush at you like wild animals. And the first job each morning consists simply in shoving them all back, in listening to that other voice, taking that other point of view, letting that other larger, stronger life come flowing in, and so on all day." C.S. Lewis is talking about dying to oneself here. And that is life's greatest challenge. So tonight I want us to look more closely at Jesus' words in our main text so that we can go a little bit deeper into this idea of denying yourself and dying to yourself in order for the power of God to come alive in your life. So the first thing that I want you to see is before there can be a resurrection, there must be a death. Before there can be victory, there has to be a battle. And I'm sure it's no surprise to you at all that life is full of battles. Battles from without and battles within. And Jesus is saying that just like the kernel of wheat needs to die before it can produce many seeds, we have to do the same. Now, obviously, he's not talking about dying physically. He's talking about total surrender to the will of God. John 12:25 says, "The one who loves his life will lose it, and the one who hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life." Now, I realize that there are some people who hear that verse and they say, okay, now wait a minute. I have to hate my life? How can I do that? My life isn't perfect, but I certainly don't hate it. But when Jesus spoke these words, he was using an idiomatic phrase that his listeners would be able to understand. He's talking about a comparison here. It's like when someone says, "I was driving down the highway doing the speed limit and the other cars were passing me like I was standing still." Well, the truth is, you weren't standing still. It was a comparison of exaggeration. If you love your life and your dreams and your ambitions and your own comfort level before everything else, and that matters to you most, more than anything else, then your life will ultimately unravel. On the other hand, if you treat your life not as something to be grasped in a self-serving way, but as a gift that you can give to the service of God and to the service of others, you're going to discover that life is truly abundant. And ultimately, he's talking about who will be on the throne in your life. Who's going to sit at the head of the table? The greatest challenge that you and I are going to face is the challenge that we face day after day after day with who is going to be the boss today. Who's calling the shots today? Every day we have to make it a point to pray the prayer that Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. Not my will, but yours be done. That's where dying to oneself begins. And where does it lead? Where it leads to the resurrection power of Christ. It leads to the fulfillment of his promise. In John 10:10, he says, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they, that means you, might have life and have it to the full. In order to experience the resurrection power of God, you have to be willing to die to yourself. That's why Paul said in Galatians 2:20, I've been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. So not my will, Lord, but thine be done. Not my life, Lord, but your life in me. It's the challenge that we face every day, to surrender ourselves fully to the Lord. And that brings us to the next layer involved in dying to oneself. Being a fully devoted follower of Jesus means that we're called to tag along with him rather than asking him to tag along with us. Jesus said something here it's impossible to ignore. In John 12, verse 26, the beginning part of that verse, he said, if anyone serves me, he must follow me. Where I am, there my servant also will be. Now I want to split a little bit of a hair here, okay? Because this idea really comes down to a person's fundamental approach to living the Christian life. Now it's true, it's absolutely true that God is always with you wherever you are. Wherever you go, you can be sure that he is there with you. That's why King David wrote in Psalm 139:7, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? Well, you can't. You can't flee from God's presence because he's everywhere. And that includes everywhere that you are. He is always with you. But here Jesus is talking about the attitude of submission that he expects from his followers. You remember the old bumper sticker that said, God is my co-pilot? Remember when that was popular? It's a nice sentiment, but technically, he's not the co-pilot, okay? He's the pilot. We're what you might call the first officer. He's the captain of the ship, we're the first mate, okay? And I'm talking specifically about having an attitude that says, God, I'm going your way. I'm going to do the things that you want me to do. I'm going to do the things you want your way. Wherever you are, that's where I want to be. And there's a difference between saying, God, this is what I'm going to do. Please bless it. And saying, God, what is it that you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? Two totally different things there. Jesus said in verse 26, where I am, there my servant also will be. That means that it's his itinerary, not yours. It's his game plan, not yours. You're on his playing field, not yours. Now, I know a lot of folks have been through Henry Blackaby's Experiencing God study. This church, I think, has gone through it a couple of times, I'm sure, over the years. Okay? What's one of the main themes of that whole study that you heard Henry Blackaby say over and over and over again if you watch the video? See where God is working and join him there. There have been times in my ministry when I finally came to the realization that God couldn't bless what I was doing because I was too far away from where he wanted me to be. There have been times when I couldn't hear his voice because I was, in a sense, out of range. I was asking him to tag along with my plans And he was trying to say to me, no, I want you on board with my plans. Dying to oneself means that there are going to be times when you have to let go of some of the things that you think you want and embrace instead God's plan for your life and God's strategy for your future. And when you're able to do this, you're going to discover the next level of total surrender to God's will. And that is that there will be a time in your life when you, like Jesus, must be able to say, but that is why I came to this hour. In John's Gospel, we hear Jesus say that his soul is troubled because he knows the next steps on his journey are not going to be easy. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we see the same thing happen in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he says to his disciples, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. And yet he couldn't turn away. Because as John 12:27 says, but that is why I came to this hour. He couldn't turn away because that's why he came. And I've heard it said that there are two great moments in your life. The moment you were born and the moment you realize why you were born. It's for a specific moment, a specific purpose that God has placed you here. And as you fulfill his plan for your life, there are going to be times when you face challenges that seem to be beyond your strength to bear. There are going to be times when your soul is troubled and overwhelmed with sorrow. There are going to be times when you want to pray, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. And when your heart is fully surrendered to him, you will also pray, yet not as I will, but as you will. Because you're going to know in the deepest part of your being that it was for this very reason that I came to this hour. You know what the exciting part of being in God's will is? It's that over and over again, this is going to be what your thought is. This is a defining moment for me. And this next step of obedience will determine my place in the world, my role in God's kingdom. I want you to notice that as Jesus approached the hour of his death, even though his soul was troubled and he was overwhelmed with sorrow, he didn't have an attitude of defeat, but he had an attitude of victory. He began this speech not by saying that the hour has come for me to be cast aside, or the hour has come for me to be humiliated, or the hour has come for me to be abandoned. He said in John 12:23, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. He knew what this hour was about. He knew what it was going to accomplish in terms of eternity. He knew how the story was going to end. Yes, he was troubled by what he knew he was about to face in this moment. But he knew the ultimate outcome was that death was going to be destroyed, the grave would be conquered, the curse of the law would be cured, the power of sin was going to be disabled, and God was going to be glorified. And he proclaimed with confidence, that is why I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Though our trials and hardships are nothing compared to his, we have to face life's defining moments with the same kind of attitude. For this reason, I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. And this moment that I'm talking about, this reason for you to be in that moment, at that exact point in time, these are almost never just a one-time thing. You're not going to be saying, oh, that's why I was born. Well, I'm glad I'm done with that. Now I can just coast the rest of the way through. That's not the way it works, okay? We need to look for those moments every hour of every day. We need to find out why it is that God placed me here right now. Because there's a reason. Every moment of your life, God wants you or has placed you someplace, and you need to look for why it is that He has you there. There could be no victory without a battle, and no resurrection without a death. If you want to experience God's resurrection power, you have to recognize that fundamental truth of being His disciple. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, when Christ calls a man, He bids him come and die. That person who is out to trip you up and get in the way of living the life that God has called you to live, there's only one way to deal with them. You have to die to everything that person stands for, so that you can live in the resurrection power of Christ. The greatest challenge you will ever face, you face every day of your life. And that is, who will I surrender to today? Will I surrender to that self-centered side that's caused me to stumble constantly? Or will I surrender to the God of grace, the God of mercy, the God who has promised His overcoming power? Jim Elliot, who was murdered on the mission field while serving in Central America, once said, "He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." This is what dying to oneself is all about. When you turn your back on a way of life that will certainly lead you nowhere, and surrender yourself instead to the lordship of Jesus Christ, you give up what you cannot keep, and you gain what you cannot lose. It's a decision that you make every day. We overcome life's greatest challenge when we make it our daily habit to say, Lord, not my will, but thy will be done in my life. And Father, glorify your name. Take out your prayer sheets, if you would.